Welcome to Romany's Realm. I'm Romany and I have another creative quickie for you. Last week I showed you how I made these little palettes for my tube gouache so that I could turn them into little travel palettes that I could pop in my bag when I go out rather than taking my tubes with me. What I want to show you this week is a little update I've made to it, and I'll show you what I've done with this one. On the front I've put colour swatches and the colour names, and on the inside, if I can get it open, there we go, I've put a little mixing palette and it's reusable. So let me show you how I've done that. What you're going to need is some watercolour paper and some sticky back plastic, clear book covering plastic. The first thing you need to do, if you have a mirror in your palette like I do, is to very carefully remove it. Now please be careful when you do this. These cheap mirrors will shatter if you're not careful with them. What you need to do, whoops, there we go, see, that happens. That didn't happen with the other one. What you need to do is get your pokey tool underneath the edges, just enough that you can loosen the glue. Do not prise it up. If you prise it up, it will shatter. What you need to do is get something flat underneath it and slice it away from the glue rather than pulling it away from the glue. So you can see I'm not lifting it this way, I'm sliding it so that it comes away from the glue. You have to be careful because your bone folder will stick to the glue. I didn't have anywhere near as much trouble with the other one as I'm having with this one. It popped right out, but there you go. Oh, there's a lot more glue on this one, that might be why. So there you go, there's my mirror out. Please dispose of mirrors carefully and sensibly. The first thing I did was I cut out a piece of card that would fit into this. This is actually a recess for the mirror. I drew around the mirror and then I cut inside it. So in theory, this should slot right into there. And it's even got glue on it already, so I just smushed it down a little bit. And there we go, that's stuck. Now what you need is some clear plastic. Just going to guesstimate the size first of all. So I'm going to wrap it around the edges and then I can trim it down to where I need it. So I just need it a little bit wider than the creases. What I'm going to do is stick it down to the palette around the outside of here, which will create a waterproof barrier, which means I can wipe my palette off with a wet cloth and reuse it. And I'm also going to trim the corners off, which will make it easier to fold down. Oops. Remove your plastic, and I popped it down in the centre, and before I stuck it all the way round I used my bone folder to squish it down in the middle here so that it creates again a waterproof barrier. So give it a good smush down, no air bubbles. You don't want air bubbles underneath it because air bubbles eventually will disintegrate the plastic and it won't last very long. It'll start to break up. Whereas if you get the air bubbles out, it'll last a lot longer. Obviously this is only sticky back plastic, you could just remove it and replace it anytime you want, but by doing this it'll last a bit longer. So I'm just getting it right down into those corners, and then pretty simply all you're going to do is bend it over and push it down into those outer corners, like so. I found it easier to start in the middle and work to both ends. Bending it over the edge first and then push it down in the middle, push it up. Last edge. Like so. And then I just sealed down the edges. You can tell where the seal is not done because it goes clear. See, that's not clear, whereas this is clear. So you can see, it's a bit like when you put sellotape down and rub it, you can see where there's air bubbles underneath and where there isn't. So just get as much air bubbles as you can out. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to make it fairly watertight so that you don't, when you wipe it off, you don't get, I mean, obviously you're not going to be submerging it in water, but when you wipe this off, you don't want to be getting water up underneath this plastic seal. So that's all this plastic is for, is just to seal it in so you can wipe off your palette without any trouble. So there you go, there's my palette, mixing palette. The next thing I'm going to do is I've divided this up into 12 because I've got 12 pots. Grab my brush and I'm just going to pop a bit of each colour in the corresponding box. This is the first time I've actually used these. These are the good quality ones, and look at the difference between the two yellows. I mean, that's permanent yellow and that's lemon yellow, but look at the opacity, the difference in the opacity, and that's using almost exactly the same amount of paint. I literally just had a damp brush, popped my paint in, popped my brush into the paint and picked up a little bit. So much difference. My red, my magenta. Oh, love this colour. It's called various different things in different brands, but in general it's known as rose madder. This is actually called magenta, but it's rose madder and it's a beautiful colour. It's my favourite colour in the world, which makes a nice change because everybody else seems to like teal, which I detest. I really don't like teal at all. I'm not a big fan of blue and green, and the mix of the two is just no. Apologies if you can hear the dog barking outside. It's not my dog. We've got some drain cleaning going on, and dog across the road doesn't like the drain cleaners apparently. Mine are asleep as usual. Another of my favourite colours, this is Prussian Blue. Black, obviously. I am going to put black and white in that other palette, in the little dish here, but I don't really see the need to. Create an additional band to put those colours on the palette. You can see which one's black and white. I'm just putting these in because obviously you can see, otherwise there would be gaps. White might seem like a pointless exercise, but actually this watercolour paper is actually a little bit cream coloured, and it's quite good to see what the actual white will look like. Incidentally, last week I did have a bit of an issue with my white separating, and I ended up mixing it back up. After the video, what I did was I just got the corner of a paper towel and I just stuck that into the air bubbles, which got rid of the air bubbles, but it also mopped up a little bit of the extra fluid, and now the white is absolutely fine. My silver has some blue in it. Let's get that out. Don't know how that happened. Pretty, 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 pretty. Watercolours, of course, are transparent, so if this was a watercolour palette, I would probably do a little swatch on the corner of each one just to show the black, white, silver and gold layered over other colours. But gouache is opaque, so you can't really do washes or glazes over other colours. You can to a certain extent, but not properly, because gouache stays wet or stays re-wettable for a long time. Watercolours eventually dry. Gouache stays basically re-wettable for pretty much the duration of its life. I mean, it takes a long, long time for it to completely dry to the point where you can't re-wet it. And when I say a long time, I'm talking years. Whereas watercolour, after a few months, you can't really reconstitute it. And some watercolours, you can't even, once you've watered them down and they've dried, they basically become stains, and it's very difficult to do anything else with them. But gouache is opaque, so it's very difficult to do water layers, because as soon as you put water over the top of another colour, that colour starts lifting off. Anyway, we're not doing a gouache session right now, so I'm just going to let that dry a second. So there's my little swatch. I'm now going to write on my colours, because at the moment I can remember what they are, but eventually I will have no idea. And then I'm going to take another piece of sticky back plastic. I want a piece a little bit bigger than this. So about there. And I'm going to stick it onto this first. And then trim it around the edges, and I only want to leave barely 1/4 of an inch. Again, all I want to do is stick it around the edges to make it fairly waterproof. Plus the size that I cut this is actually just small enough for the lid, so I don't want too much of the plastic going down over the sides of the lid. There we go. Make sure my palette's the right way up. And stick my swatches down. Once I decide if there are certain colours that I definitely want to keep mixed up, I will probably take this off and redo it. But I really want to play about with my colours first and decide exactly, you know, get to know what colours to mix and things. I will probably end up with a green, a purple and an orange, because those are colours that I will probably use a lot. Or I may just forego mixing them and just buy the basic ones, because it's very difficult to mix pure violet, pure green or pure orange. Seal this down all around the edges, and oops, random piece of sticky plastic there. And there we have smart little palettes. Got my colour swatches, know my colour names for when I need to refill them. Got my colours inside and a little palette for mixing, which is wipeable. So I'm rather pleased with those. I can now take those both with me if I want to. Just stick a band around them, and I've got a nice portable little set of gouache for my travel kit. If you decide to have a go at making your own palettes out of whatever containers you can find, I used eyeshadow containers, then by all means give me a tag on Twitter, Tumblr or Instagram at Rhomany, or you can Snapchat me at RhomanysRealm. Thanks for watching, see you again soon. Bye!